you look at the prior sessions, the prior RAC meetings, you can kind of see that for continuity purposes, what the flow is. So I'm going to start off again by welcoming everyone. Again, this is the Insurance Premium Increase Notices Rules Advisory Committee, part of House Bill 2563, to basically, for personal lines insurance like homeowners and auto, have some sort of premium increase notification to consumers that request it at renewal. And so kind of go through that order. As people may have been aware or been here before, we kind of go through introductions first. So again, my name is John Hayworth. I'm pitch hitting for Scott this week on this RAC meeting. I am the Insurance Licensing and Retaliatory Tax Manager here at the Division of Financial Management. And I'm going to go and Karen, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, I am Karen Winkle, the Rules Coordinator for the division.
And as I said, I'm going to go through the kind of the division people as we go through. So, Eric Bredesen, can you introduce yourself and your title?
Yeah, sure. My name is Eric Bredesen, and I'm the Property and Casualty Product Regulation Manager for DFR.
Thank you, Eric. And Tricia Goldsmith, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Tricia Goldsmith, and I am the manager of our Consumer Advocacy Unit here at the division.
And Simon Howard, please introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, all. Simon Howard. I'm a data analyst with the division's business analytics team.
Thank you, Simon. And Du Ying, can you introduce yourself, please?
In the division.
Okay, there we go. And Jesse O'Brien.
Good afternoon, everyone. Jesse O'Brien. I'm the manager of the policy section with the division.
Great. And Kimmy Padawaran.
Hi there, I'm Kimmy Padawaran. I'm part of the compliance team.
Excellent. And then for folks that aren't, it looks like Sarah Angove just dropped by. So Sarah, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Sarah Angove. I'm a property and casualty market analyst for the division.
There we go. So are there any other entries for DFR that I missed? It looks like I've got them all. Excellent. So Jess, could you please introduce yourself and who you are with?
Yes, hi, Jess Alanis with Travelers.
All right. And Bailey Ladner.
Bailey Ladner with Progressive.
Thank you. And Harnam.
Harnam Atwal, Progressive Insurance.
Excellent, thank you. And Isis.
Isis Thornton Saunders, Professional Insurance Agents of Oregon.
And Jennifer.
Jennifer Muse, State Farm.
And Jim Davis.
Hello, I'm Jim Davis, longtime senior disability advocate with the Oregon Consumer League, and also I chair the Oregon Insurance Advisory Committee.
Excellent, thank you, Jim, for joining us. And Joel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joel Loucher. I represent United Policyholders, a nonprofit that assists consumers with insurance issues.
Glad you're here, Joel. And John C. Powell.
Yes, John Powell, representing State Farm.
Excellent. And the other John Powell.
The same.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
And Michelle. Got Michelle online?
Yep. Hi there.
Okay.
Michelle Druce, Executive Director of the Oregon Consumer League, and I'm also a consumer rep on the Insurance Advisory Committee.
Excellent. And Mike Eliason.
Hi, everyone. Mike Eliason. I'm representing independent insurance agents and brokers of Oregon.
Excellent. And Montana.
Hi, everyone. Montana Llewellyn with the Northwest Insurance Council. Kenton Bryan has a conflict today, so I will be representing the interest of the association.
Okay, well, thank you, Montana. And if you've had a chance to look at the draft that we just sent out earlier this week, it has a lot of Kenton's comments in there. So we'll be kind of perusing through this. Again, the draft is also on our website for folks who are trying to figure out where that may be. But we're going to start by going through that. So, Karen, can you bring up the actual notice?
And I believe we have more people to introduce.
Did I miss anyone?
Did we?
Sean Miller's here, the American Property Casualty Insurance Association.
Good to hear you, Sean.
Carrie Olson?
Yeah, Carrie Olson with Mutual Lien of Claw.
Glad you're here, Carrie.
Spencer Peacock's here with Division of Financial Regulation, part of the business analytics team.
Thanks, Spencer. You and Simon can tag team.
David Dahl, I'm Property Casualty Actuary with DFR.
Excellent. Any others?
Denny Ritter here on behalf of the American Property Casualty Insurance Association as well.
Okay. I think we have them all. We've got 28 folks in the meeting, so I just want to make sure we've got everyone introduced. So yeah, Karen, if you can share the draft. This is the latest draft, rulemaking draft. We're going to kind of walk through it step by step, and I know that we've got some red X's there for what the actual rule number is going to be. Breaking news, Karen says that we finally got some numbers. We're going to have to start putting in that, but rest assured, we are working forward on that. We did not change anything, though, for the statutory authority or purpose, so there really hasn't been any change on that. But if we move down to definitions, Karen, we have changed a little bit, so I'll kind of read it out loud here for folks to follow along. So it has for sub 1 there, for House Bill 2563, section 2.3 states a clear and reasonable written explanation of a premium increase from an insurer must include all but not more than 4 of the factors that most significantly contributed to the premium increase. The Department of Consumer and Business Services defines this requirement to meet an insurer responding to a written request from an insured regarding a premium increase at renewal, and they shall provide not fewer than 1 factor that significantly contributed to the premium increase as defined in subsection 2 of this section. And sub B there, provide information about as many as 3 additional factors that significantly contributed to the premium increase as defined in subsection 2 of this section. And again, this language is kind of pulled from what Kenton relayed earlier, like at the end of last week. And then C there, and an insurer may, but is not required to provide additional information to an insured about any additional factors that contributed to a premium increase in any way. So what we were looking at was what were the significant factors. There's got to be 1 factor. I mean, it could be 1, but we're pretty much looking at a total number of 4. So anyone have any questions about the language that we have in here so far? Okay, then we will roll to the next page, Karen. And you can see the numbering changed a little bit. So we're starting off with 2 from the prior page. Factor significantly contributes to a policy increase from one policy term to the next when it exceeds 2% of the current policy premium and ranks in the highest 4 impacts on a dollar increase basis of all the rating factors that changed. So Joel, you have a question, sir?
Yes, actually, we are submitting some comments on that last section with respect to the definitions that we think would provide a little more clarity in that. I think the language now, you've added an insurer can provide more than one or more than four, for example. And I think in the body of that section up above, it sounds like they are restricted to four. And I think the language in that section, and I don't know if I'm going into too much detail at this point since you're just doing a read through, but in the language about what an insurer has to provide, I think it would be better if it say is not required to provide more than four. So that's up, but it says, but not more than four.
Yeah, and that's right out of the statute. The statute says not more than four. And so this rule is basically saying the same thing. However, an insurer, therefore sub C, an insurer may, but they're not required to provide additional information to an insured. So we're starting with the definition that is in the actual statute itself.
I can do that.
And then because other folks have contributed, said, well, what if an insurer wants to provide more? Okay.
Okay. Yeah, they just kind of conflict, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And so here again, the insurer, they must include, but if they want to provide more, they can.
Okay. I would add under A, it says A is really about the first factor. And I think A should say, and I'll submit this in writing, provide the specific factor that most significantly contributed to the premium increase as defined in subsection 2. And then under B, it would be provide information about no less than 3 additional factors for a total of 4, if applicable, that contributed to the premium increase.
Okay.
So
appreciate the comments.
To be more direct.
Yeah. Well, and part of this is covered on the next page too. So
yes.
So
Okay,
Karen, do you proceed to sub 2? There we go. So here we go. A factor significantly contributes to a policy premium increase from one policy term to the next when it exceeds 2% of the current policy premium and ranks in the highest 4 impacts on a dollar increase basis of all the rating factors that change. So again, we're trying to look at, you could say, oh, well, one thing contributed 98% to that policy increase and one other item contributed 2%. Okay, so it'd be like 2 factors. So here on sub 3, if no individual rating factor can be identified by the insurer as significantly contributing to an insured's premium increase as defined in subsection 2 of this section, the insurer must provide a clear and reasonable explanation to the policyholder that includes the policyholder specific information about factors that generally contributed to an increase in that premium. And then sub 4 says that if an insurer determines that all factors that contributed to an insured's premium increase resulted from policy changes initiated by the insured, insurer may respond to a premium increase notice request with information provided in a manner to be determined by the insurer that the increases were due to policy changes initiated by the insured. So I guess, here in this case, if I add a 16-year-old driver to my policy, 4 months before renewal, that might have a pretty big increase. And, so the spouse, she gets the bill and she's saying, John, why did this go up so high? Well, again, I probably have a general idea, but I would be able to ask the carrier or possibly the agent, and we'll get in that a little bit as far as some clarification points. So any questions or discussions about that paragraph or paragraphs? Yes, Michelle.
So I provided some comments or questions related to the scenario where a request for an explanation is submitted by a consumer. And as a result of reviewing the request, it is determined that there was some kind of an error in the factors that were considered. I'm still not seeing that addressed here. And so I don't know if it should be here or in the notice itself. But I think part of this process will be that errors will be discovered. And as a matter of fact, I think that came up in our first meeting. So how does a consumer get a response in that scenario? And what, what does it say?
Well, in general, and a consumer can always ask for information, specifically to premium increases. But, say hypothetically, they didn't get the discount that they thought they were going to get. Hey, I turned in my paperwork for my good student discount. I think that would list here as far as what are the rationales for significantly contributing to a policy increase. So I think that those sort of situations can still be captured in here because the person's asking, why did my policy go up? Give me, the top 4 factors. Now, it could be the fact that they may not have, say, the correct garage address or something like that. I think where you may notice it the most would be probably if you move from one company to another, if a company moved blocks or something like that. But I still think that situations would still fall under this. I just can't come up with every single, possible scenario. But a person would have the right to say, hey, why did my policy go up? And can you give an explanation? Does that make sense, Michelle?
No. So
okay.
I again, this particular statute provides, a 20-day time frame. So I think that's also valuable. I mean, I understand your point that consumers can always ask, and there are a range of different scenarios that can come up, but this particular statute will provide a 20-day turnaround and response time with a clear, explanation related to the consumer's question about their premium increase. And I just see that continuing as a gap here, because I do think this process of the insurer having to review what were the reasons, and then if it was a mistake, that the criteria wasn't not applicable or an error, I just don't see that being captured here. And I think consumers should still get a written response, and they should get it within 20 days, and it should be understandable and reasonable.
Well, thank you for your comment. Any other comments? Danielle?
Thank you so much. I was just wondering in section 2, where we've set the threshold at 2%. I know in the trades letter with INWIC and NAMIC and APCA, we had asked if there might be some consideration for a higher percentage. I think we had suggested 5 or 10%, and understand that you guys have not yet opted to go that route. And so I was just wondering if, just so I can go back and explain to my members, if there's any rationale or thought behind the 2% that might help us, really digest that a little more. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was kind of going, well, why do we need a percentage at all? Just list what are the top 4 factors. And then other folks would say, well, you have to have some sort of minimum to start with. So kind of as I went off, again, we're trying to figure out the number of factors, but not more than 4. Now, if carriers want to contribute more than 4, that's their prerogative. But you could very easily have it, if you say if it exceeds 10 or 15 or 20%, you may have 1 or 2 items that fit that real quickly without having an explanation for maybe some other lesser impacts that probably impact it. But you have to go and say, oh, well, this and maybe another thing actually create the coefficients that increase that premium. So all we're trying to figure out is minimum threshold, which in this case was 2%, to basically keep that going. And I think part of this also started out with the original language in the statute that was pulled, where the thought was having it set at say a 2.5% threshold. So that's, again, kind of the rationale of why we've left it at 2, because we've gotten input from both sides, I guess, saying we need to raise it, and then some people are saying, well, why do we need that percentage at all?
Thank you. That's
Any other
helpful.
questions? Yeah. Any other questions, folks? Okay. So Karen, you want to move on then to the next section, please, which is the premium change explanation. So some folks had said, well, it really needs to be a change explanation, not necessarily a notice, because people have already kind of figured out maybe their rate was going up, but they need now an explanation of why that was. So we've restated the actual statute again, because this is a rule, but we restated the statute that says that the director of the Department of Consumer and Business Services may prescribe by rule the form, format, and contents of the written explanation and statement described in subsection 3 of this section, and any required elements of an insurer's offer to renew a qualified policy or notification of an automatic renewal of a qualified policy. So this section outlines the explanation required, that minimum amount of information to include in the contents of the premium change notice. Insurers are permitted to provide additional information beyond these requirements. So that part has not changed. However, sub 2 now states that the insurer's premium change notice shall contain all the information required under subsection 1 and 2 of ORS, and then the new WAC, or the new rule, as well as licensed insurer, company name, address, the NAIC number, the notice date, policyholder name, policy type, the policy number, the policy period, and the effective date, along with information that instructs the insured how to contact the insurer if they have additional questions regarding this notice. And then sub 3 there, we state that an insurer may use the following format for a premium change notice, or an insurer may submit for approval a notice that provides the information required under this section in a format that aligns with other documents the insurer uses to communicate with their policyholders. So where we're going with that, this language that was pretty much pulled from Kenton, but the thought was that some carriers were saying, well, what does substantive or similar mean? How are we assured that our form is going to be compliant? And so that extra language was added. Also checked with our P&C group that looks at the forms just to make sure that that was okay, because I didn't want them to be caught flat-footed on this. So any questions about this section? Okay, I'll move on to the next section then, Karen. So this would be kind of what the form looks like, because oftentimes in developing rules, interested parties kind of want to know, well, what would a form look like? And so here we kind of put a template together to kind of be a starting point. And again, we're looking for something like this or similar. If you feel that it's too dissimilar, it certainly can be filed with DFR. So again, at the top, we changed it to premium change explanation. Have the licensed insurance company name, address, name, NAIC number, and notice date. Again, we want to make sure that it's the company name as licensed. We don't want like a trade name or a brand name or something like that. There's a number of Liberty Mutuals and so forth. We kind of want to make sure they're conducting business in their licensed name. Then the policyholder's name, policy type, policy number, the policy period, and the effective date. And because the consumers requested this, says, as you requested, we are providing additional information regarding the factors that contributed most significantly to the premium increase applied to the above captioned policy at renewal. And then it jumps down to the next bullet point. Your premium increased at renewal, and these are the factors that most significantly contributed to the increase in your premium. And then kind of scroll down a little bit, Karen, please. And then here's an explanation for each reason for your premium increase. And we basically state in the parens, insurers shall provide a clear and reasonable written explanation for the top four, or in this case, top factors that contribute significantly to the premium increase, along with a corresponding explanation. And again, because you may have some insurers that might say, well, we want to do more than 4 factors. So we basically truncated or pulled out the 4 and listed the top factors. And then we kind of have down at the bottom, if you have questions, please contact your insurance company or insurance producer via, it could be telephone, email, postal, visit the website, what have you. Again, it provides some flexibility. Some producers, especially independent producers, they kind of want to have everything going through them. And then other carriers that are all primarily direct, either through an app or something, then of course you'd be going through the insurance company at the information provided.
Hey, John.
So, yes.
Hey, so I know we talked about this last time, and I see it added in this form for, again, going through the producer, if that's the normal course of action. Can you go to the page before this, though?
Yeah.
Right here.
So here we have information that instructs the insured how to contact the insured if they have additional questions regarding the notice. And are you suggesting or agent in there? Is that kind of where you're going, Sean?
I was just wondering down in sub 3, well, in that contact, you're only referring to the insurance company. Should that be the same as the actual notice itself if there's questions to go through the producer? And I don't know that, I didn't know if that needed to be consistent.
I don't necessarily know in that regard, because the obligation is on the carrier to provide the information. It's not, the obligation isn't on the independent producer, if you follow.
Yeah.
Now, if we're giving a conduit for consumers to contact their producer and say, hey, what are the top 4 factors? Well, I would hope that the producer has a way of getting that information from the insurance carrier. But if not, the insurance carrier is obligated to provide the info if you get it. So if that conduit is through Sean, if you follow, that certainly would be one option.
No, I just asked the question if the producers or we felt that should be, again, if it's the option of the consumer to want to call their producer regarding, but I get the obligation is on the insurer. I just asked the question if it needs to be consistent, just keep that at least open.
In the back of our mind, yeah. I mean, that's why I read it painfully slow so people can kind of understand if there are inconsistencies or nuances that need to be reviewed a little bit further. But in this case, because the actual statute and then the rule is basically saying this is what the insurance carrier has to provide. Okay, but how do you get that information to the insurance carrier? What's that best vehicle? And in this day and age, there are multiple portals. You've got apps, you text, you could email. But some carriers, they would prefer everything go directly to their insurance producers. And so we just want to make sure how that works. I've had that in my own life where I thought, okay, I could just contact the insurance carrier directly on something. And they go, no, you got to talk to your agent. Oh, okay.
Yeah, but this doesn't allow that. Am I right?
Well, it would in that notice down below, if you follow. I mean, it's again, the insurance carrier has to provide the information, but the notice form, they would basically say, but what are possible ways of getting additional information if that's what you need. Now, keep in mind that people have already kind of asked for this information up front, but if they've got additional questions, again, how does that information get passed through? Does it go directly to the carrier or does it go through the producer? And we're trying to cover both sides, if that makes any sense. Any other comments, folks? Okay, Karen, can we scroll on down then? Okay, periodic data reporting. I just want to make sure I don't skip this. So we didn't change the language on the top sub 1 or sub 2, but we did get into sub 3 a little bit. And again, what we're looking at is each insurer meeting the premium threshold indicated in section 2, which is basically $1 million or greater for the calendar year being reported, that they must report to DFR no later than April 30th of 2028, and every other year thereafter, the following information group by zip code. And we moved it to 2028 because the bill doesn't, or this rule doesn't really go into effect until September of 26. So if we said we wanted the information no later than April 30th of 2027, we might not get a lot of info, if you follow. So the idea was we would get the information in 2028, and then every other year thereafter, basically to verify the importance and the reliability of the data. Joel, you have a question, sir? You're on mute, sir.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
You know, policyholders, we kind of had the perspective that this provision would kind of give a measure of the value or effectiveness of this statute, in that, you know, a certain number of policyholders, it would be reported how many policyholders took advantage of this opportunity to ask questions about their rate increase. And the issue I think we found with it is that virtually, for example, in a homeowner's policy, virtually every homeowner's policy goes up in premium every year due to inflation applied to the policy limit, to the construction cost of the home. So the numerator denominator here would be like every policy compared to the ones that had where someone raised a question. It seems more fitting that this should be limited to the policies where an actual rate increase occurred, not just something with the example you mentioned earlier of they added a teen driver, or the construction value of the home went up, or they reduced, or you know, they lowered their deductible or increased something else in the coverage that resulted in the premium increase, because that happens on virtually every policy. And it really isn't a good measure of the value of giving people this opportunity. So it'd be the ones, it should be, in our view, limited to of the policies that had an actual rate increase. How many consumers took advantage of asking this question?
Okay, thank you, Joel. And Danielle, I think you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I won't, math is not my strong suit. So when Joel said denominator, I got a little concerned, but I think it's an interesting point, but my concern would be, insurers will be expected to report on requests for information like the ones that Joel mentioned, you know, maybe where there's been, you know, it's the rate increase was due to inflation or some, you know, adding a teen driver. So the numerator would include the full universe of of possible reasons your rate might have increased. So it seems like the denominator should as well, right?
Well,
Well,
those aren't, I'll just mention, to clarify my point, is there is a premium increase on every single homeowner's policy without there being any rate increase necessarily. That premium increase comes about through the inflation factor applied to the dwelling construction cost. And so you would have virtually every homeowner's policy, as an example, goes up in premium every year due to that inflation factor, whether there's a rate change or not. So if we're trying to see the impact of giving people the opportunity to complain or inquire about a rate increase, we want to kind of balance the actual number of policies that had a rate increase, not a premium increase, to the number of inquiries about the rate increase.
Understood, but when, oh, sorry.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. People might inquire just because their premium went up.
Right.
But the reason the premium went up is typically more obvious to the person if they're comparing this year's coverage A limit versus last year's coverage A limit. It's just going to kind of not even be what this is about, and that is the rate change. I mean, it's not actionable to do anything about the premium increase arising from inflation. So it seems like we're trying to match up actionable information with an actionable inquiry.
So thanks for the comments. So sub C actually talks a little bit where, well, sub B is the total number of qualified policies where the premium increased. Sub C is the percentage of the premium increase for each policyholder from Group B above that submitted a written request for an explanation for the premium increase. So it may be a small number of people that ask for information, or it may be a significant number, but we're trying to break it out kind of by what are the factors that I guess people are asking about or resulted from it. And then D, we've got basically a list there for any other data that DCBS determines necessary. Montana, you have a question.
Yeah, and sorry, John, if I'm reading this incorrectly, but to me, it looks like A and B are asking for the same data, and I might just be interpreting this wrong, but can you clarify what the intent of the agency is for A and what the intent is for B?
Well, for B, it's basically what are the qualified policies where the premium increased. So, you know, how many homeowner policies did you have for the company where the premium increased? And here on sub A is where a policy renewal offer was made during the reporting calendar year where the renewal term premium is greater than the term premium. So you could have a couple circumstances where premium was relatively flat. Not sure that that necessarily happens, but it's basically trying to figure out what that universe might be of qualified policies during that time period. Not sure if that actually answers your question, but we're trying to find on a calendar year format, and not everything renews on necessarily a calendar year. They might renew halfway through the year. Okay, but you need to have kind of an idea of the number of qualified policies kind of during that year, that time frame, and then what are the ones that had a renewal offer during that time frame to try to get some sort of baseline. And then, like I say, with C is the percentage where the premium increase for each policyholder from Group B above that submitted a written request for an explanation for, again, the premium increase. And it's one of those, we're trying to figure out the timing, I guess, of some of these events, but then also the magnitude. Again, how many people are actually going to be asking for this information? And then being able to report that and see if is it a significant number? Are we actually catching the correct information? Then allows us to see, do we need to do anything with this rule or not? Joel, you have a question? You're in mute there.
I'm actually seeing the rationale behind that last question. It seems like the A should be the total number of renewal policies, and B should be the number of policies where the premium was increased. And that would give you the information about the increase, how big of a subset policy increases were, and then of those, how many did you get an inquiry on?
Okay.
So it does seem to me like A and B should not both be increases.
So if, let's just say, total on sub A, total number of qualified policies defined, right? Where a policy renewal offer was made. Okay, so I'm with insurance company A, so Acme Insurance, and I get a renewal for my homeowner policy during the reporting calendar year, where the renewal premium was greater than the current term premium, right? So I got renewal notification from Acme Insurance. I'm going, wow, that's pretty expensive. I think I'm going to go shop it around. So I don't actually renew the policy. I go to Zenith Insurance and get my homeowner's policy moved to there. So under that scenario, I had a qualified policy with Acme Insurance. A renewal offer was made, but I didn't renew it. I actually shopped and I went somewhere else. Sub B is the total number of qualified policies where the premium increased. So what we're trying to figure out is how many people actually renewed, if you follow, Joel. So if I lose 20% of my people, I got the renewal offer for Acme Insurance, and 20% of that total moved somewhere else, my retention rate, is basically 80% for that company for that year for renewal. So Danielle, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering why we're collecting that information. Or I don't recall, I'll go back and read the statute, but I don't remember that being part of the bill that DFR was going to be tracking the retention rate.
Well, in effect, we're not tracking it, but I'm giving it an explanation of what we're asking to see just basically how many people are asking for information. We're not necessarily trying to match consumer A as they move from Acme Insurance to Zenith Insurance, if you follow. We're just trying to figure out from 40,000 feet how many people asked for this information at renewal. And the way the terminology was listed originally was, oh, well, we would only capture the folks that actually renewed, not necessarily the people that asked for information prior to the actual renewal, if that makes some sense. Because we're trying to figure out first how many people are actually asking for information about the renewal, and is the company capturing that and reporting it? And then at which point we're going to kind of regroup and try to figure out, okay, are we actually asking the right information up front? Unfortunately, I guess the other spin on this, because I've been involved with a lot of the market conduct annual statements from the NEIC, we're trying not to be overly zealous on collecting information, if folks can follow, but we're just trying to figure out what is the uptake if we basically have these notifications. Are people actually going to be obtaining or asking for that information, or are they basically going to renew, and then later on, after it hits their checking account for auto pay or something like that, and then they start saying, well, why did rates go up so high?
Might
So
I
Michelle, you had
ask
a question.
why you didn't include in A where the renewal premium offered, and under B where it actually renewed, to make that distinction more clear?
Well, in this case, because it's the total number of qualified policies where the premium increased, so that's the aggregate, okay? So
Right.
again, if Acme Insurance had 100 qualified policies and they offered 100% of those policy renewal offers, but there's only 80% that renewed, okay, we wouldn't be necessarily capturing the folks that 20% that may have been eligible to ask that question and get that information. So that is kind of the background on where that's going. Michelle, you had a question?
Yeah, so I guess I'm wondering, can't we include the data point of just asking, how many inquiries did you receive? I mean, I understand, looking at the renewals and so forth, but I think a very valuable data point is how many actual requests for information did you receive? And I guess I don't see that here in a manner in which, we can really look at how effective is this? Is it meeting the need for consumers? If we don't know how many consumers are actually reaching out versus just how many renewed.
Well, and in this case, they're reaching out in writing to the company according to the statute. So it's not necessarily just a phone call inquiry, but
and
for
I understand.
folks,
Yeah, I understand that. I understand they need to meet the requirements of inquiring in writing and having sufficient information. But we're not going to get from these criteria here how many consumers actually inquired after following the rules and actually requested the additional information.
yeah, understood. So thanks for your comment. And we also do have there for sub D, any other data that our agency determines is necessary. So I appreciate the comment. And Hanam, you got a question?
Yeah, I have a clarification question followed by a comment afterwards. I think I heard you say the intent of subsection C is to basically gather data on how many consumers reach out and take advantage of this opportunity to get an explanation on their rate increase. Is that correct?
That's the big picture. Yes.
Yeah, and so I can get behind that. I think that's definitely a good data point to track. A comment from me would be basically what Michelle just said. I would echo that. If the subsection could have something that talks about us providing a count of number of inquiries we received and the total number of policyholders on our books, that probably would be a very simple and accurate way to measure the intent.
Thank you very much for the comment. Any other comments? Yeah, Danielle?
Sorry, me again. I would like the opportunity, and I apologize for not coming prepared with language, but I'd like to go back with INWIC and NAMIC and see if we can offer some suggestions for ways that we think. I think I get the intent of where this is going, but I would like the opportunity to suggest some other ways that might be achieved. And then the other thing, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. I think that I think I understand where you guys are going with this, but I remain, even after explanation, a little confused about some of this and concerned that some of it's outside the scope of the bill itself.
Thank you. Joel?
Yeah, it just feels like that the percentage of policyholders that are going to submit inquiries, if you're talking about compared to the number of policies that the premium went up, it's going to be a very tiny percentage because the premium goes up on virtually every homeowner's policy just due to inflation on the construction costs, and a significant percentage of auto policies, just because of cost of vehicles and such goes up even without a rate increase. So to me, this will diminish the appearance or the value of giving consumers this opportunity. It'll look like not many took advantage of it when you're really, to me, looking to measure the ones where the insurer actually took an actual rate increase of some kind, and the premium goes up by some significant amount. And that's the, this small percentage is already a small percentage that ever complain to a regulator or to the insurer. They just deal with it. But I think you want to limit this denominator numerator to be people who got an actual rate increase, not to just everybody whose premium increases, because that's the whole population in all property coverages. I don't know. It just depends on what you want to have your numerator denominator look like, and this will look like
Absolutely.
This bill has a 1% success ratio, when arguably it might have a 20% success ratio of the people who actually got a rate increase.
Thank you, Joel. Any other comments? Because we're looking at, if you're going to write something up, if you could submit it by Friday, November 14th, so that we can, basically get some time to look at it, and if we need to modify. So Danielle, do you have another question?
I do. Sorry, just one more. On C, I went back in portion of the bill that creates the data call. Can you explain the rationale behind knowing exactly how much the premium increased for those who've submitted a written request? Because the language of the bill doesn't. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Again, we're trying to sort what's triggering the request. So is it people that they're having a significant premium increase, and so that's what the uptake is, or is it kind of a bell-shaped curve, I guess, for lack of a better description, so that we can kind of get an idea. Is it the ones that had a real big hit? Okay, I can get that. So then maybe we need to recalibrate later on and say, okay, anything with a higher increase, there might be more value in collecting that information. But until we have an idea of what that population might look like, it's kind of hard to hone in on, I guess, specifics, if you follow. And Jesse, you had a question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one piece of the context to this was looking at the original introduced version of the legislation. There was the idea that we would transition into having a threshold above which a policyholder would automatically get a notice of this kind, and that was removed from the bill. But I think part of our interest in collecting this information is to get a sense of, if there were going to be a threshold, like what are the characteristics of the policyholders who are asking for this information, because that could be helpful in figuring that out. And if that was to happen, it would be years down the line, but that's one of the questions we'd like to answer, I think.
Yeah, again, what's the general population, then what percentage are the ones they're asking, is it having the biggest impacts?
That is helpful context. I will just say I suspect that it would be much easier for insurers to comply with a total number of policyholders that have reached out versus having to, get this granular for, each policyholder. This is the percentage increase. I'm just purely from a reporting requirement and staff resources perspective, I'm just flagging that I'm likely to hear concerns from our members on that front. I also understand that the intent is based on the earlier introduced version of the bill, but that's not the version that we're doing a rulemaking for in front of us at the moment. So I think we might have some concerns with that.
Yeah, I definitely can appreciate the comment. Any other comments? So now it's kind of the time then is there any other public comment that you folks want to make? Kind of going once, going twice. Again, if you're going to be putting something in writing for comments, please submit them in by Friday, November 14th. So we've got a chance to kind of look at it. And then I'm going to kind of segue then over to Jesse on any possible next steps, because his name's listed on the agenda. So Jesse.
Yeah, I've forgotten that I was listed on the agenda. I think, there are still a couple of substantive questions and items of feedback that we're probably going to need to take back and discuss a little bit further. So we'll probably want to call this group together again. And we also will need to discuss the statement of need and fiscal impact document that will be accompanying the proposed rule. That's something we affectionately call the SNIFY. That's something that we need to get RAC feedback on. So I would anticipate that we'll bring this group together one more time, but I think we're pretty close here. We're down to some pretty in the weeds details. So I think we can probably move forward after one more meeting of this group. And then of course that wouldn't be the last opportunity to provide feedback. We also will be taking public comment for an extended period after that with the usual rulemaking process. And there'll be a public hearing on the proposed rule, but I think we can conclude this RAC process after one more meeting. Joel, please.
Yes, I just kind of back to that last point in a sense. I know that it's focused on how much the premium went up. I would feel that it might be more useful to know the zip code where the inquiries came from, and it might be easier to track. And I feel like we're probably could align that information with things then such as what the wildfire risk is in that zip code as compared to others, or accident rates if it's auto or something. Might be if you're going to track a thing about these complaints, I think knowing something about the location might be the most helpful, as opposed to even the amount of increase. Just my thought at the moment.
Worth thinking about.
Thank you. I just did.
All right. Excellent.
Thanks.
Well, I do want to thank everyone for taking the time out of their day to hear me ramble, but also participate and give some pretty good feedback, because we're trying to, I think, collectively work through implementation of this rule, because that's what the statute says we're supposed to do, but make it effective too. And so I appreciate all the comments. Like I said, if we can get anything in writing by a week from this Friday, that would be most appreciative, because that way, if we've got something that we need to adjust on our side, and we've got a number of people from DFR that are on the call that can basically say, yeah, if we do this, that might be helpful, or we might want to look at some other way of measuring something. That's helpful too. So again, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with us today. Take care.